Welcome back to the Student Hub Live. Well, that was a brilliant session, and I think Katie and Sally managed to do really well doing 2 Student Hub Live events in one day. They managed their time very effectively, and Sally's even coming back for more for our open programme debate tonight. So that'll be really interesting from 6 p.m. Right now, we're going to focus on the National Student Survey, a very, very important survey. And joining me to discuss this are Vicky Marsh, and Ron Elder, and also Sophie Lovejoy, who is a student with the Open University. Now, Vicky, you're a statistician, Ron, you're a student experience manager. Tell us then what the NSS, the National Student Survey, is and why it's so important, because it's really front of mind right now for so many different reasons. Ron, what is it?
It's a survey of what students think about the course that they're currently studying and the institution that they're at. So for us, it's do students enjoy the modules they're on? What do they think of the Open University?
OK. Now, students might get, in fact, students often are asked for things. You know, we're often asking them to fill in various surveys. They might have an end of module survey. How do they know which one the NSS is? Like, what are the important ones if you're going to do any surveys? Because we really want students to fill out this particular survey. How do they identify what it is, and how might they be invited?
Go on, you go first.
The student experience on a module survey, which is the end of module survey that you were just talking about, is an internal survey that's sent out to students asking very similar questions, but it's tailored specifically to OU study. The National Student Survey is an external survey that we have a statutory requirement to participate in, so every institution in the country is required to take part in this survey. The importance of it is that it is used to, the statistics that come out of it, like inviting students to rate overall satisfaction, are used in the tabloid league table rankings.
Right.
So that's one of the links, that's one of the reasons why it's so important to institutions. And most recently, the link that has given it more prominence is that the Teaching Excellence Framework, an initiative brought in by the government to rate institutions as gold, silver or bronze, is using the results from the National Student Survey to inform that rating. So all of the surveys that you receive while studying as a student would come via an email link to your to the preferred email address that you've communicated to the university. But for the National Student Survey, it would come from an external fieldwork agency, Ipsos Mori, because they're commissioned by the Higher Education Funding Council on behalf of all institutions to send that survey out.
So it's a big deal for us, because at the OU, I guess there's this, as you say, this requirement to have some level of completion there.
Yep.
And also it's important in ranking things. Now, that's all well and good for us, but for our students, can you talk about why filling in a survey is good? Because I really like filling in surveys because when I have to design my own surveys, I can take ideas from those surveys, and it gives me an example of being a participant. And I think, you know, so many of our students really like research, and they sort of are going to have to do something in some way, shape or form that is perhaps research-based as part of their qualification. So it's a good way of, I guess, seeing how other people are doing stuff. What sorts of, well, who can take part in it? Because it does sound really interesting, but not everyone can they?
That's correct. So because it's a statutory survey, the Higher Education and Funding Council identify participants who are invited on the basis of the statutory returns that each institution provide. So we're identifying students who are projected to be in their final year of study for a qualification. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's just an undergraduate degree. So I should also say that it's only relevant for undergraduate students. There is a postgrad equivalent. But if students are projected to complete a certificate or a diploma, then they would also be invited to participate. And that's based on, as I say, a set of algorithms that the Higher Education Funding Council articulate. So we don't have any control to some degree over who would be invited to participate.
Okay. Now, we asked people whether they're aware of the survey. Most of them said no. 58% said that they weren't aware of the survey, and 33% said that they were. I must confess that when I was studying, I wasn't aware of the survey, and I probably had emails. And I always remember sort of taking quite a lot of notice of things that came from the OU, in particular my tutor. But other people asking me sort of stuff, I didn't sort of identify. And I wonder if maybe if other people are in that, gosh, I'm a dreadful example, aren't I? But I wonder if other people are in that sort of position where Ipsos Mori are doing lots and lots of research. They're a massive company, aren't they?
Yeah.
And so I don't know whether maybe students don't recognise that that's where it's coming from. So tell us how they're contacted, and is it an email? What happens?
Yep. So the survey is initially sent out as an email from Ipsos Mori, and they invite students to participate. And then 2 weeks after, they send a reminder email, and they also then start a call campaign. So they would be. They've just started that for the NSS for this year. So phone calls will be coming through to prompt students to respond. But then we also do lots of work at the OU to try and promote the survey as well. So we promote it by doing we're planning our own call campaign through our student support services. We promote it through all of our social media channels, and we have posters around campus for anyone who's physically on site. We also promote it because lots of our students are members of staff as well, so we promote it through the internal sort of intranet channels as well.
So what you're saying is, this sort of selection and thing, I mean, like all good research designs will have this sort of sampling method that will be done so that it's all fair and sort of standardised, isn't it? Which is why certain people can take part.
Yeah, although for the National Student Survey, it's actually effectively a census, so it's an eligibility criteria as opposed to a sample. So
right.
If you meet a certain set of eligibility criteria, then all students that as in that they've projected to have completed their qualification within the next year, then they would be eligible to participate. But that's a projection,
yeah.
And obviously in face-to-face institutions, it's much easier to articulate when a student is in their final year of study. So we do have some concerns about the way in which the algorithms are calculated, which means that we do have lots of students in the sample that have been identified who are actually studying at level 2, for example, or level 1.
But sometimes you might finish a qualification with a level 2. I mean, I know lots of students who'll do, a 30-point right at the end that's a level 2 module. But ultimately, anybody who's asked to should do it, is the take-home message. OK, let's take a quick trip to the hot desk. HJ, oh, nice hat.
Ah, thank you. Well, it's not actually a hat. Hats are, really last season. We're going into February. I thought, let's stitch autumn, winter 2017. We're going into spring, summer 2018. Lots of positivity. So I'm trying out some new headwear here. But
it looks like a scarf.
Well, it is a scarf, yes. I couldn't find anything else. That's I've been throughout the entire
Your
hat
spring
box.
collection is a scarf.
It is a scarf, yes. Anyway, we've had a good chat about the National Student Survey. David Norton did it a couple of weeks ago, and Davin's done it in the past as well. I think I did it a very long time ago as well, but we do have a couple of questions that I think be good to answer. So, Juliana's interested. Is it about the university services, or is it a bit broader than that?
Yeah, what's in it?
Well, it's about the module that the students are studying, and it's about the institution, about the Open University. So is the module right? Does it work? What recommendations can be made to improve that? Are the services provided by the university, so the tutors that we have, the support processes, are they good enough? And negativity is as good as positivity for us, because we want to hear the truth. And we then use that across the university to improve things for the future.
Yeah, I've been involved in so many meetings, and in fact student voice is something that is so front of mind at the moment. Yep. It genuinely is all fed back in certain ways, shape or form. How long does it take to complete?
The actual survey, I think there are 27 questions, Vicky, perhaps half an hour or so.
OK. So not too long?
Not too long.
No, OK, so it's a small amount of time. Did you have some other questions, HJ?
Yeah, we did have a question. I think Juliana's studying with the Open University, but she doesn't live in the UK. So do some students from outside the UK get to do the survey as well?
Yes, I think that the eligibility criteria is quite defined for the NSS, and I actually think that for this one, students who are studying with the OU are eligible regardless of where they live. But there are some criteria around eligibility that's based on location.
But that's not something the students have to worry about, because
No.
either they're going to get sent
They're
the
either
link
be
or they're
sent it or
not,
not.
and if you are, then that's good.
Yeah.
But Ron, postgraduate students, can they get involved?
Not for this one. There's something called the Postgraduate Taught Experience Survey, PTES, not quite as catchy an acronym. That's specific to postgraduate students, and that's held later in the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
April, yeah.
Okay, so then sort of talking about this, I think that this is a point that you covered earlier on, but just for people who may be tuning in. So this isn't an OU survey, so we don't have a say in terms of what there is. So there might be some duplication with some of the other questions, I guess, that we're interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we don't have any say over the content of the delivery mechanism, and also we don't actually receive the individual responses back from students either. So there's because it's a survey that's run by for the sector, the information that we get back is aggregated basically. So we get it back by qualification, but we wouldn't know what an individual student has said in response. And we use all of that information in our annual quality review processes to inform changes and improvements in practice.
Brilliant. Now, I'm going to give you some stats, Vicky, because I know you like them. So, we asked people, do you think the Open University does anything with the information from the National Student Survey? 40% said yes, 60% said they don't know. Now, I'm not sure whether that question is good enough. We're limited with the widgets because we have to have very short questions, but doing anything. I mean, you said that we listen to students, Ron, and that we sort of do pick up on things where there might be, well, I guess good or bad things, but we do sort of hear that survey. Is there a concern in particular in the sort of way that data protection is changing that students have? I'll just give you the other stat, Vicky, so you can give a more comprehensive answer. Are you concerned about how the feedback that you provide is used by the Open University? 70% said no. I think demonstrating how trusted the Open University as a source, 20% said don't know, 10% said yes. Right, so data protection and what some of these things are used for. How important is that as a consideration when people are filling things in, and what is actually done with this data?
Do you want to start?
I think of data protection, you
I
can
can
probably do on that. In terms of what we do with it, though, so second question first. Because it's aggregated, we clearly don't know what individual students are saying. What we do know, though, is what the general feel is. And we've got to be completely honest. If students say they want something changed and the Open University can't afford it, or if it's going against something else that we're doing, we won't necessarily follow that. But we do take account of all of the views. And perhaps more importantly, it's the negative views that really do help us, because it's where students are telling us something isn't working for them that we can make improvements.
And they don't just have to wait to be invited to take part in a survey. There is a student voice component that students can just tell us about anything at any one time, can't they?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think also the other thing to say is that the Student Voice website that was recently launched, there is a section of the Student Voice website which articulates exactly which surveys students will be sent and at what point in their student journey, so that they can see where they've got opportunities to feedback. But there's also a section of that website which is called You Said We Did.
Right.
And that is the forum where qualifications and modules and the institution are feeding back specific examples of survey results where students have clearly articulated that there's something wrong or that there's something positive about their experience, and then what has the university done in response to it. So there's some really clear examples there of exactly how we do this, and we do it very rigorously on an annual basis, and it really is taken very seriously and taken into account.
No, absolutely. HA's put the official link if you want to find out more about the NSS generally, and I'm sure he will find the link for the Student Voice website as well that he'll find from the Open University. So take a look at that, because that's really exciting.
We wanted to answer on data protection.
Yes, before, and then I want to talk to Sophie as well about her student concerns and things that she might want to feed back into this survey result.
Yes, data protection is something that the Higher Education Funding Council particularly is concerned about for this survey, I think because of the prominence in terms of it being used in league tables. So there's a particular concern around this survey in terms of institutions effectively gaming the results to improve their position in the league tables. So that's that's why for this one in particular there are very
political.
strict. It is, yeah, indeed. So there's incredibly strict guidelines and rules around protecting student data as far as this is concerned. So it's the only survey that we participate in where we don't get the individual data back. So we'd never be able to link responses to an individual student.
Yeah.
We do provide we provide the contact details, which is a statutory requirement from our systems, and students whenever they sign up, there's a section of their advice and guidance which articulates that we use that information for research purposes or for statutory returns, and this forms part of one of those statutory returns.
And as I'm sure, Vicky, you're aware, you know, any sort of survey that goes out from the Open University, or I appreciate NSS is a different and external company, but we all comply with all the data protection, all the ethics, and everything is all very well cleared in advance.
Yeah.
So we would never be tracing things back to an individual student and saying, right, minus 10% for you.
No, not at all. And all of the data is governed under data protection regulations, so only sort of named individuals would have access to the individualised records, and they're anonymised as soon as it's sensible to do that.
Brilliant. Now, you've invited Sophie along because you wanted to include some sort of student voice. So what did you want to ask Sophie?
I think it was more a question of us asking whether Sophie wanted to pose questions to us.
Yes. So when on the subject of data protection, for example, when you sign up, you agree to the terms and conditions, you put your contact details in. That could be 4, 5, 6 years before you do the survey. So where would you need to update your contact details if they change in that time? Is it just on your student home, or would there be somewhere else that you'd have to change it as well
Good
to make
question.
sure that it was up to date?
Because the details that are provided by the university are provided each year, so for each of the surveys, it is the details that we'll actually hold for you at that time. So for the survey that's taking place at the moment, the details held for students will be those that are passed across. So in that sense, it's for students to make sure that their details are up to date.
I think interesting question as well, because the survey doesn't always just go to current students who are currently studying. So there are some students who would have already graduated and moved on. So it's that group of students that it's most likely that their contact details may have expired.
So for those group of students who have graduated or are due to, what's in it for them? Why should they participate if it's all done and dusted?
Good question. I think we're hoping for some altruism from fellow students. The changes that will be made from the survey will necessarily be relatively long term. We're not going to make changes next week or next month, but only by hearing the student voice can we actually make changes. So if students, even if they've actually graduated and left us, if they don't tell us what they thought, then we can't make the changes. So it's for future generations.
I think also that many of our students returned to study with us at an interval after they've completed their studies. So because the survey is very much asking students to reflect on their experience with the university as well as particularly with that qualification, we would hope that information would then inform any changes that we might make, and when they come back to study with us, hopefully they will see that those changes have been made.
Okay, yes. And so what about for example, disabled students or somebody who might not have access to their emails? Does that information about disabilities get passed on so that the NSS are aware that it might have to be, they might have to contact them differently, or is that not passed on, and how would that work?
So the return that we make to the Higher Education Statistics Agency, which the NSS sample is based on, would include the disability flag. But the information that goes on to Ipsos Mori, who run the fieldwork agency, is very tightly defined in terms of the fields that are required. And they're pretty much restricted to contact information. So a disability flag wouldn't go with that information. However, the survey is run using a number of different modes to try and facilitate interaction with people with lots of different needs in terms of how they might complete the survey. So as I said, the survey starts with an email, but then there are a number of other different contact strategies that are made to try and ensure that everyone has an opportunity to respond.
And how many people need to respond for us to hit this target? I know the OU is very big, so I'm assuming we've got a much bigger sample than face-to-face universities. Does that hold us at a disadvantage or
it's
an
a bigger
advantage?
sample. It's the same percentage. It's a magic 50% that we have to exceed.
50%?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
so,
a huge percentage.
Yeah. So good question. So our sample for 2018 is 24,000 students, and most other institutions wouldn't have any more than sort of 2,000 or 3,000 as a maximum. So
And they can
by
put
far-
posters up on campus
Absolutely.
and encourage people.
Yeah.
So that's really important. In particular, I guess, if students haven't updated their contact details and their invitations sitting in empty email boxes, it's really
Yeah.
important to fill those in if you've got them.
Yeah.
Because that's, I mean, technically speaking, that's quite a high return rate, isn't it?
It's phenomenally high for a web-based survey. Yeah. And the other, I was giving an anecdote actually as we were waiting that the NSS has actually been boycotted in the last couple of years by some very prestigious universities because of the link made between the NSS and the Teaching Excellence Framework. And one thing that's really telling from that is that the thing that's made the biggest difference to their response rate is actually not necessarily that the students have boycotted, but the teaching staff have boycotted alongside in support of the students. And some of those big named institutions have gone from response rates of 80% down to 30% because the tutors and the lecturers are not helping to encourage students to participate by asking them to do it at the end of their lectures and that kind of contact point. So it makes that contact makes a huge difference in terms of facilitating response rates along those kind of lines.
Yeah.
So when you're only making web contact, typically most of the surveys that we run internally, we get response rates of around 30%. That would be good for a web-based survey. So,
Can I just ask one other question? Is this the only one that that students from the OU might have from an external source?
No.
Most other, no?
No. So there's a suite of surveys that are sent out that are statutory requirements. So there's the National Student Survey is sent out to undergraduates as they reach the end of their qualifications. There's the Destination of Leavers in Higher Education Survey, which is another one run by the higher education funding bodies, and that goes out to graduates 6 months after they've graduated because they're looking to see whether they're in employment or not, and those metrics are also used in the Teaching Excellence Framework.
Right.
So that's another one.
So those important ones are commissioned by external agencies. So if you are approached by those external agencies, then it's a really good idea. It would be really helpful then to the OU to fill those in.
Yeah, and also off the back of Sophie's comment as well, I think the other thing is that it is a reputational sort of factor as well, in that if we're demonstrating how students feel about their experience with the Open University, then there's a link there in terms of how the OU is perceived externally, obviously.
I think so many students really love the OU and they really want to support the OU. And it's one of those things, I guess, where what we're seeing here is that every voice counts.
Absolutely.
And that actually it's not just a meaningless survey that can go into some sort of marketing machine and do nothing. It really does make a difference, not only to the OU, but where the OU is appearing on league tables, how it's feeding back and improving services for future generations. And perhaps those students who then return to study a year or so later when they've realised they can't live without it.
And I think on that as well, that it really does come down to that every individual student who takes the time to participate in this can make a difference. So that 50% threshold would prevent the OU from appearing in the league tables or not if we don't reach it. And a couple of years ago, that happened for Wales. So we have to get each of our nations over that threshold as well for us to appear in the nation thresholds. And it really did come down to sort of less than 10 students being the difference between us not being published versus them being published.
50% is 15% with you maths loss, it is, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Okay, did you have any other questions, Sophie?
Yeah, actually just one.
One more.
One more. So if you are in the sample and you take the NSS, the survey, but you haven't finished your degree yet, would you maybe have to do it again if you're in the sample, or would you be able to say, oh no, I did this the other 2 years ago, or would you have to do it again?
I think there's something there around each survey each year is different. It's independent, and so if someone has taken part in a previous part of their studies and is then invited to take part again, it's important they do so because that's the extra number to get us over the 50%.
And they're being flagged because they've reached a threshold in terms of eligibility as in terms of the Higher Education Funding Council. So it may be that somebody's completed a certificate or a diploma and then goes on to complete an undergrad degree. And in that instance, they would be invited to reflect on their experience for the certificate or diploma and then for their degree once they reach the end of that qualification. So there are legitimate reasons why a student would be invited to participate more frequently.
That'll be me. Do it for my diploma, I'll do it for my undergrad when I get it.
Brilliant. Well, Sophie, thank you for all those questions. They were brilliant questions. And thank you, Ron, and thank you, Vicky, for coming along. And I think, if nothing else, so the take-home message here is, if you get the link, if you get a phone call from Ipsos Mori, please fill it in. It does matter to us. Every single vote counts. But also, I think this has been a really interesting session in terms of some of the policy issues and some of the ways in which statistics are used and generated, and how important they are as well. And how the Open University has a massive team of statisticians doing various things across the university that really do feed into policy, but also feed into making that student experience so much more meaningful for generations to come. So thank you all very much for that session. Well, we're going to be back a little bit later, but let me just take a quick trip to HJ, HJ, no.
I thought I'd try something different,
Those
electrify
are
my
cables
headwear
no, it will
collection.
only fall off and you'll make a fool of yourself.
Oh
Does
dear.
what happen
I,
if I'm
I
not
feel a
here?
fool already now.
Sorry.
Do I have to
I
look
thought this
after
would get a
him?
good response, but never mind. But we've been aside from my headwear, but we've had a great chat in the chat room. We've posted the links to the National Student Survey. I'm going to take this off now, so everyone can find out more. So follow the links if you are interested, and respond if you can as well, and let us know how quick and easy it was as well. But so I'm looking forward to chatting to everyone later. We've got a big debate coming up here, so I'm sure a lot of people in the chat will want to get involved with that. And if you want to ask anything that you think later, or we've missed anything, you can always email us as well, studenthub@open.ac.uk, and we'd love to get back to you.
Absolutely, no, we certainly will. Well, this evening from 6 o'clock tonight till 7, we have an open programme debate where we have two teams of three who are debating whether a generalist or specialist degree is better. We do have a widget or interactive voting tool that says who has the better hat, which I think unfolds the mystery of why we've had so many hats in the studio. But we're also going to be looking at the most convincing argument. Yesterday you will have heard, and possibly this morning, from Dave Rothery about Moons and his Moons MOOC. And him and some of his PhD students are going to come along this evening and talk about some of their favourite planets, which will be really, really interesting. Not only from the perspective of planetary sciences, but also in terms of some of the things that you can do if you're doing a PhD at the Open University. So that'll be interesting. That's from 7 o'clock this evening. We're going to be playing some replays of some of our boot camp sessions now. That chat room is open. You can tell us what you think of the show by feeding back on the website, so studenthub.live.open.ac.uk. There's a little feedback button, a really quick form that you can fill in to let us know what you thought was good or not so good. You can also email us your thoughts, studenthub@open.ac.uk, and we will get back to you. And we, of course, have Twitter as well. The hashtag is StudentHubLive18. But we'll be popping in and out of the chat between now and 6 o'clock tonight. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I hope you're feeling a lot more excited about your studies and that we've shown you some of the wonderful things that you can get involved with as an Open University student. I'll see you again at 6 o'clock tonight. Bye for now.